This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider and I have a very, very special guest today because my very special guest is my very special friend. Oh, hi, Ambi.
Hi, Anna. It's so fun to be doing this.
It is. So Ambi Kavanagh is originally from London. She now lives in Los Angeles, where we met. What's 8 years ago, Ambi, or so?
Yes,
or even longer.
Years.
I don't
know. 8 years. It feels
like
decades have passed in that time. But it was 2012. You were newly married. I remember that, and I had just got my visa.
Oh wow! So Ambi is a life coach, an astrologer, a reiki master, and a sound healer. And Ambi just published her first book. Congratulations, Ambi!
Thank you.
And the book is called Chakras and Self-Care. And it's about activating chakras through your daily rituals.
Yeah.
Ambi, I don't even know where to start our conversation because we share so much.
I know.
And we go a long way back. And I just want to say to my listeners that you and I used to hike every week, at least once, when we were in Los Angeles for an hour and a half approximately. And we were talking about life and what we were experiencing. We were both fresh in LA and struggling our own struggles.
Yeah.
And I remember how often we said, wow, these conversations were so important and deep. We wish we could record them.
And here we are now recording them.
Here we are now. I'm so excited about that. So, Ambi.
Oh, me too.
Will you tell my listeners a little more about yourself and your work?
Yeah, thank you. Such an honor to be on your show. I've been catching up on the episodes in the last few weeks. So, I always preface all of this by saying that I'm a former lawyer. And it's funny that I still come up with that introduction, but that my journey of transformation from being a lawyer and a litigator and an entertainment lawyer and an honor expert to being a healer, a life coach, a transformational guide is very much the basis of the work that I do because I transformed my entire life in my mid-30s.
And I met you as a lawyer, Ambi.
Yeah, I was a lawyer. I was life coaching, though. I was life coaching on the side. It was like a side business, but I hadn't yet fully stepped into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. I was very much still like extricating myself from the law when we met. And I was very much in the middle of all my mess, actually, and the transformation.
You were.
That really pushed me into this new chapter. So, I guess everything I do, I describe as alchemy. It's transformation. I help people to transform themselves and their lives through a number of different ways, whether it's, in the past, I did loads of healing sessions or life coaching sessions or astrological readings or, through my book, which is helping people work with their energy bodies, or through my podcast, which is very much a sort of life coaching podcast. I'm all about transformation. And understanding that change is actually the only constant that we can experience in our lives. And what we have to do is learn to navigate the changes that life throws at us, that the universe throws at us, through internally changing and shifting with these different currents that life brings. So I'm really about change. I'm like a change junkie in many ways.
You are. And you and I went through so many changes together. It was beautiful watching you, Ambi, on your journey.
Oh.
When I met you and you were a lawyer and you were working on that first book, which I have to mention. I'm sorry.
It's okay. You can mention it.
I want to see that book printed one day. You were working on a book called Laws of Love. Am I right?
Yep.
And that book was following different stages in a love relationship through law, as far as I remember. And you were explaining which laws are important to know and think of at a certain stage. And I'm so in love with this concept. I really hope this will be yet another baby of yours.
I'm glad you are. Publishers and the agent don't seem to be too thrilled with the idea, but you never know. It might find the right home. Maybe one day down the line. Or I'll just publish it myself because I want to.
Okay. I'm pre-ordering.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad. Happy for the support. What a journey it's been.
What a journey. And then I remember when you went, I think we went to our first gong bath together, our first sound bath, or you went to one and you're like, you have to try this.
Oh, well, I'd gone in London back in 2008.
You have? Okay.
Oh, yeah. From 2008 to sort of 2011, 12, when I actually moved over to the US. And then in 2013, in the summer, I was introduced to sound baths by a friend, and I became hooked and addicted to these sound baths. And then I dragged you along with me, and you also enjoyed them. And that was really a really transformative journey for me, because I enjoyed them so much, but I never, ever would have thought that I would end up playing gongs and doing sound baths myself. It's just like I didn't link the two, with the pleasure that I experienced from the sound bath and the healing. I certainly didn't take that and sort of go, oh, and this is something I'm going to do for a living one day. No.
Ambi, I have to tell you about my first sound bath with you, because I told Nick, you know what? Ambi found this crazy thing, this typical LA thing called sound bathing. And Nick is like, oh my God, what is this crazy LA thing? You have to go. And I went as a joke. Like I went like, what is this insane Los Angeles thing? And I went to that sound bath with you, and I got seriously hooked. I've never stopped going. Wherever I can find one, I go.
Yeah,
I miss
they're
them
amazing, aren't they?
Really
they're just
amazing.
so healing and transformative.
Yes, they are. They're such a unique experience. Like nothing, it doesn't compare to anything else.
It doesn't compare to anything else, because each sound bath that you go to will be a completely different experience according to, not only the person who's playing and where they're at on their journey and the instruments that they use on that particular day, but also where you are in your life at that particular juncture, what's going on in the universe around you, the people that are at the sound bath. It's just so many different factors play into each experience. And it's extraordinary to me that I could play 2 sound baths in a day for different groups of people and have a completely different experience and have them have a completely different experience according to all those differing factors. So yeah, sound bath rock. Everyone should have sound baths.
They should. Ambi, let's talk a little bit more about your book. Happy birthday book. The book was born yesterday, just came out.
It just came out.
Beautiful pink cover.
Oh, I love the cover.
Yeah.
They couldn't have designed it better for me. I mean, it really is just so me, that cover.
It is, yeah.
And so the book is, it's a very basic and practical and accessible guide to the 7 main chakras, which is the 7 main energy wheels in each of our bodies. And it provides you with really easy to use and simple and effective rituals to activate those 7 main energy centers in the body, to heal them, to align them, to bring them into better flow, so that basically if each chakra works at an optimum level, then the areas of life ruled by those chakras will flow better for that individual. So really it's about sort of saying to people, hey, bring order and bring healing and bring alignment to your energy body. And when you bring order and healing and alignment to your energy body, then you're going to experience better order and healing and alignment and flow in terms of different areas of life. So it's very practical, and it kind of demystifies it all a little bit, so it's probably more for beginners on their energy healing journey. But I think that, some friends of mine who are very much, been in the wellness world and been studying the chakras for over 10 years, still read it and sort of went, wow, this is so helpful. It's reminded me of X, Y, and Z that I need to do to keep my energy body in check. So it's a useful Bible to have for self-care. And for healing your energy body.
But you know what I was just thinking as you were talking about it, how even if you don't believe necessarily in these things, I think it's a nice way to just push yourself for a little more self-care.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
As we know, women need an excuse for a little more time for themselves and a little more self-care. And even if you don't believe in chakras and energy and things, I think it's a nice way to push yourself to just concentrate on your well-being a little bit.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And, I do talk a little bit in the book about sort of like, okay, what if I don't believe in energy healing? And I talk a little bit, I do talk a little bit about the science of energy healing and, sort of give people a little bit of information about that so that they understand that it's because, people can be skeptical, and I get it. There's so many memes around. There's so many, energy has become such a vague and meaningless term in many ways, but there is science behind some of this. And regardless, as you say, even if people just look at it as sort of like, okay, self-care, here's another sort of filter through which I can approach self-care, then when you start trying out, these journal prompts or these meditations or these little exercises, and they start making a difference to your life, well, if that's helping you, then that's wonderful, right? Because like you said, I think we can all do a little bit more self-care, especially women.
But Ambi, let's jump to Mama. Let's talk about Mama. We did not practice this. Will you help me? Her name is Rajeswary.
Perfect. You just said it perfectly.
I did it.
I'm very proud of you, and so would she be.
Yay. And she is from Sri Lanka.
She is indeed. That's where I'm from as well. I mean, I wasn't born there, but my mum, was born and raised in Sri Lanka, as was my dad. My dad's passed on now, but Mama and Dad were born there, and they actually moved to England separately as individuals who just were on their own journeys of wanting to explore life outside of Sri Lanka and the world at large. And they moved seeking just expansion for themselves, which I think is such a beautiful thing that they both did that individually. And they actually met at a mutual friend's wedding. And they had what's called a love marriage, which is funny because at that time, that was very unusual. People used to have arranged marriages, and people still have arranged marriages in my culture, or an introductory marriages where you're introduced to somebody who would be a good match for you. But my parents had what is called a love marriage. And so they were not set up. They were not fixed together in that way. But they were obviously both Sri Lankan, and they got married, and then my brother came along, and then I came along.
Ambi, let's talk just very quickly about Sri Lanka, because will you tell me where it is on the map?
Yes. So Sri Lanka is a tiny tear-shaped, almost like a little pear drop or tear-shaped island off the most southern point of India. And it is a beautiful, I think it's why I just naturally love greenery, because Sri Lanka is actually very green and tropical. And so it has a lot of rain, and it has a lot of deep, rich greenery, quite similar to that what you usually see in Hawaii. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful country. I haven't been there since I was 10, so over 30 years, which is kind of crazy, but there was a civil war there for many decades.
26 years, I read. That's crazy. It ended in 2009, and as I said, I'm very embarrassed I never knew about it, because it just ended recently.
I know.
And it was a British colony until 1948.
Yes, and then it was called Ceylon, and then they gained independence and it became Sri Lanka. I mean, it still has in terms of, and actually it was a Dutch colony at one, but there's a Dutch influence.
It was Portuguese as well.
Portuguese as well, yeah. So it has you can see that in terms of the architecture and a lot of the sort of the buildings and some of the, it's just entwined into the culture there, that you can see that influence, that colonial influence in a really beautiful way, actually, in many ways as well, particularly with regards to the architecture.
And it's a mostly Buddhist and Hindu.
Yeah, it's mostly Buddhist, actually.
Okay, and now back to Mom. So Mom married and had two of you. What did she work?
She did. She was a nurse. And when we were young, she really stayed at home with us and would only work weekends so that my dad could look after us. So one of her big things was really being present for her children and being around, being there for us and really being present for school drop-offs and pickups and being around during the day, doing other things at home, that were necessary for the sort of smooth running of a household with two small children. But she always worked a little bit. And as we grew older, as a nurse, she worked in hospitals and did shifts at the weekends. But as we got older and, my brother went to secondary school, which I guess is like middle school in the US. And as I got to sort of double digits, then she sort of started working when I was at school. So sort of between 9 and 3, she would work and then she would collect me afterwards. But so she really gave up a lot of her life to raise us.
So she went back to being a nurse, Ambi?
She didn't actually go back to being a nurse. She went in to work at a doctor's surgery and she was a receptionist there. So she was a receptionist who would basically deal with all the patients and all their appointments and all their prescriptions and all of those kind of things. So, with where I lived, she was very well known in my sort of local community, because she was, the head receptionist at the doctor's surgery. And so, oh, don't worry, so Mrs. So-and-so, I've got your prescription for your Monday. I'll sneak it through for you. I'll make sure the doctor signs it. So she was very, liked and respected and very popular at the local grocery shop.
Do you want to tell me more about her? Or should we jump into her lessons?
Oh, sure. We can jump into her lessons.
Let's do that. What was the most important one?
I feel as though faith was the biggest thing that my mum has given me, and faith in a divine power. And my mum refers to that divine power as God. But my mum is really somebody who is guided and comforted by and led by faith. So by that I mean that, even when things are really terrible in, she's experiencing challenges in her own life, or the world looks like it's going to, in a horrible direction, she has faith in something else. She has faith in God, and she has faith that this, whatever is happening, whether it's, challenge she's going through or the world is going through, or however bad things may appear, that God is in some way behind that. And that this divine power is guiding it, and things aren't necessarily how they may seem. And she has faith in things working out the way that they're supposed to, and that things working out ultimately for our highest good. And it's quite an unshakable faith that she has. And I think for me, this has influenced me to have faith in something bigger than myself. I'm not religious. I would say I'm much more spiritual. And I talk more about the universe, and sort of I have faith in the cosmos or the universe, in this kind of divine order that's unfolding. And I think that, similar to my mum, I guess I just do have a lot of faith in this process of life. And that faith has protected me, I think, at times from the hardships of life, because it's comforted me so much. And I think that faith has also guided me that, there's times, especially during my fertility journey, where I could have given up. I could have said, oh, it's not going to happen for us, or, oh, I'm this age, or I'm this, whatever, these are the statistics. But I had faith. I had faith that I was meant to have a child with my husband, and that's how it was, that was something that the universe wanted for us. And that faith was bigger than my fear. And I think that's what my mum really taught me, was that, keep your faith. Have faith in this divine bigger power, and make sure that faith is bigger than your fear.
I was always very impressed, Ambi, when we were on our hikes and talking about everything. And I was really impressed how sure you were that you were going to have a child one day. And there was never any doubt in that. And that I often think about that, how beautiful it was that you never posed it as a potential, but as a sure. You were never like, if I have a child one day. You're like, I know I'm going to have a child one day.
Yeah, and I wasn't young.
You weren't young, no. And I learned
Let's be honest.
I learned a lot from you in this respect, and thus from your mom,
glad.
To so strongly believe in something and never put it as a maybe. If you really wanted to talk about it as if it's a sure thing, it's happening. There's no doubt in that. So thank you, Mom.
Yeah, thanks, Mom.
What's the next one?
The next one is discipline. My mum is one of the most disciplined people that I've ever met in my life. And what I mean by that is that she's very, like, if something needs to be done, she will work hard enough to make sure that it happens, And that hard working, maybe it's an immigrant thing from having moved from another country and, being at the lower end of the social totem in some ways. She's just, and it's funny because what I didn't say about my mum was my mum and dad. My mum came from an extremely wealthy family in Sri Lanka. I mean, she was one of sort of 11 children. My grandfather was a very famous lawyer. My mum grew up with servants. I mean, literally, that's what they call them. I don't like using that term. I would call it as like household staff, but she was like, oh yeah, we had servants. Like they had they had people that served them. And to go from that to marrying a love marriage with my dad, who was somebody who was from the completely different end of the social spectrum, who was from an uneducated background. He was not educated. His family were not educated. My dad had to leave school at 16 because his father had left his family and he was the eldest son and had to look after everyone. When my mum and dad married, that wasn't, it's not like she was living in England with a bunch of servants in a 6-bedroom house. She had a very humble life, and she had to work very hard in many ways to make life work, to make life good for us as a family and for her children, and to give us the best opportunities. And she did that through discipline. She did that so her disciplined approach to life is something that I've really learned as well. It's like this tenacity, I guess, that she has, that I have watched her do it, and I've watched her achieve things, even with a very, low, small income when she was a nurse or when she was the receptionist at the doctor's surgery. It's not like she was in these, and by the way, she was educated, but it's not like she just didn't end up going in that direction, with her career. My brother and I always say, my mum coulda, shoulda, woulda been like the CEO of a huge, hedge fund or something. She's so smart. And if you look at how her life played out and the career she found herself in, not there's anything, nurses are the most amazing people. And even her job as the, doctor surgery receptionist, she was in a role of service, but it didn't necessarily equate to her intelligence or her capabilities. But that's where she found herself in life. And wherever she found herself, she would apply herself. And even with those small means of a very small income, but what she managed to do to save money, to provide for us, to be able to help me, when I was buying my first home, my mum and dad gave me my deposit. And my mum and dad, really, it was my mum that made that happen, because my dad wasn't so good with money. My mum's discipline and squirreling away this money, squirreling away these. Anna, I don't know if you know this, but I out-earned both my parents as soon as I started working as a lawyer. I out-earned their joint income straight away on a lowly trainee solicitor salary in London. And so my parents, I did not grow up around money. I did not grow up with wealth. I did not grow up with all of those kind of things. It was not something that I had, but at the same time, I had so much love, and my mum always made sure I had what I needed, to the point that when I was in my 20s, she was able to turn around and say, okay, now you have your job as a lawyer. Now you're qualified. You're making good money. But guess what? I've been saving all these years because I want you to own your own home. And here is a deposit.
Wow.
Yeah. What an incredible achievement.
Incredible.
Just unbelievable.
So she, like my mom, she insisted that you own your home.
She was very, very adamant about that. And, I no longer own my own home. I sold it to move to the UK. I sold it to move to America.
One day.
I will. I'm going to buy one. I've got my eye on a little place in Lake Arrowhead, actually. So I'm thinking that one day I'm going to buy a little cabin for myself, my family. But it'll be mine. It'll be an Ambi purchase, not an Ambi and Kevin purchase. But yeah.
So interesting that our both mums were so adamant about that a woman, if in any way and shape possible, should own her own home.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, it's funny. I think it's also about financial independence. And, I've been married for 3 years now, and Kevin and I don't have a shared joint bank account. We just don't. We have separate bank accounts. We have separate things. We know what's going on with each other, but we don't share our finances in that sense. Of course, everything is really for the collective, for both of us, for our unit of our marriage and our family of 3. But no, I have my own independence in that way. And that's very, very important to me. And that takes discipline, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm so glad we're talking, because I'm learning so much about where you come from, because again, I was admiring you always for your discipline. You're one of the most disciplined people I've ever met. And it's hard when you are a self-employed person, when you're a freelancer, to be like, no, I cannot go for lunch or coffee right now because I have to sit down and work, especially in LA when it's always sunny and you always have a feeling, and everyone is out there. I have really no idea who manages to do any work.
Who actually works in LA? How do they afford their lifestyle? I have no idea how they afford their
question.
lifestyle.
But I was always admiring you for being so disciplined. Again, thank you, Mama.
Thank you.
Next
thank
lesson.
you, Mama. Yeah, that was a good one for me. The next lesson was rituals, which, it's so funny because when I think about this book that I birthed, I have my mum in many ways to thank for it, because my mum was someone that had her rituals. All I remember from such a young age is my mum's rituals, whether it was her morning hot water with her lemon, whether it was how she drank her tea with the certain herbs at a certain time, whether it was when she sort of prayed to the altar. She just had all these little rituals that really gave structure to her day and her life on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, even with respect to the moon. She always knew what the moon was doing. So it's so funny that I've ended up, being into astrology and particularly being obsessed with what the moon does and the new moon and the full moon, because I grew up with all of that. I grew up with my mum kind of going, oh, it's this season, so we're going to have these types of herbs or these types of fruits because that's what's in season at the moment. She really taught me to live with respect and reverence for the seasons of nature and the cycles of nature. And also that these little things that you do, like, for example, waking up and having your hot water or your hot water or lemon, or if you do have tea, the first thing tea, whatever it is that you do, making it a ritual and making it special. So for my mom, having a cup of tea isn't just like, oh, I'll just have a cup of tea. She's like, I'll have my cup of tea and I'm going to do this when I'm having my cup of tea. And it's going to be like a self-care thing. And so that really taught me from a very, very small age to do the same. Like baths, I get that from her. The whole thing with like baths as a way of healing and releasing and aligning. I got all of that from my mom. So I've taken that into teenagehood, into adulthood, and to now motherhood. And it's really rituals to me help you get through the day, because especially like a year like this, which has been so insane, having those tiny little rituals is some stability that you can give yourself, your mind, your body, your soul, when the outside world is going crazy. And I think that is so overlooked in our modern day society. And, we develop bad rituals, like rituals, grabbing the phone when we wake up. Like, I won't do that. I will not. My phone goes off at a certain time and it goes on at a certain time. Like, I will not grab my phone when I wake up. But the little rituals that I have, like I burn sage in the morning. First thing I do is open all the windows and burn sage and spritz some rose water around and have my cup of tea. So see the baby first, but like I do all of that before I turn my phone on, because that's my way of going, okay, well, I'm awake and I don't need to know about. Can you imagine if I just bleary-eyed turned on the phone and read about the latest crazy thing that somebody had tweeted or something that was going on in the news? Like if I hadn't had my cup of tea, I had my caffeine, had my sage, had my few moments to connect to my baby and remember like why I'm here on this earth plane and all the things that are the most important to me, I would react to life rather than respond. So rituals to me are so powerful and important, and especially seasonal rituals. I think that that's something that in this modern society we've moved away from, and I think it's something that we need to come back to.
No, rituals, as you said, completely disappeared, and we only have negative ones. And I've learned, especially now during COVID and being stuck at home, 3 of us, 24 hours a day, and balancing and juggling so many things at the same time, that, as you said, rituals give a structure to your life. And I think they create certain boundaries, as you said, exactly as you said, like, because I drank my cup of tea first, now I can face the world. And if I just do it blurry eyed and I open my phone and read about this and that, there's no boundaries between me and all of this nonsense going around. So
you hit the nail on the head. And the ending that I would say, and it's funny, I was about to say, rituals create structure, and structure means boundaries, and boundaries actually mean freedom.
Yes.
And I think people don't realize that. And that freedom allows you to live in a different way that's more energetically aligned. So rituals are so important.
The last lesson connects very nicely to what we were just talking about.
Well, this is the last lesson's a really interesting one, because I think this is such an interesting lesson for all of us, whether we're parents or not, particularly for those of us who are parents, it really rings home even truer. This is a lesson of something that my mum has talked about and I think tried so hard to teach me her whole life, But unfortunately, I think in some ways it's something she really struggled with. And as a result, as a child who, you watch what your parents do, not what they say, and you mirror that, you can't help but take on what they're doing. And so I've also struggled with it. And it's ironic because that's what my book is all about, which is self-care. My mum has always talked about the importance of not overwhelming yourself, of allowing yourself to have enough time for rest and allowing yourself enough time to replenish. And yet at the same time, my whole life, perhaps because of her disciplined approach to things, all I've seen her do is like work herself so hard, like really just work so hard that she was often so energetically depleted. Even though she had her rituals and things and she was good at doing that, she still sometimes, she would cook a dinner from scratch for so many people. We'd have Sri Lankan families over, extended family and friends over, and she would be cooking all these different curries from scratch. Like literally tens of people would be in the house, like 50, 60 people in our small house crammed in eating. And so you imagine there's a big mess afterwards. And instead of sort of saying, okay, I just spent the whole day and a couple of days before this, like preparing, cooking, and then entertaining people, which is wonderful, but it's draining, right? It's like, it's physically tiring to do that. Let me just leave the dishes to tomorrow, or let me just like be kind to myself for the next few days. No, I have to get all the dishes done before I go to bed. And that's part of her discipline. But at the same time, I feel like many times in her life, and this only really shifted when she retired, she bit off more than she could chew. And so she would talk to me and scold me at times and say, you're doing too much, you're doing too much, you're taking on too much, you're overwhelmed, you're tired, you're running around like a headless chicken. Yet she would be doing the same. And I'd be like, Mum, you're doing the same. And so we would end up having these hysterical conversations where she'd be like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I've like socialized with like 5 people today. And I would be saying the same term. Then we kind of looking at each other like, yeah, we're both basically as bad as each other.
It's so cute that you say that, because my mom was very similar. She would also overwork herself, and it was so scary to see those, as you say, energetically depleted moments where I would get worried for her. But then she would scold me that I have to take a better care of myself. I guess that's mom's love.
Yeah, I think that is mum's love. But I think also a lesson from that, which I've taken for parenthood, is, 2 lessons I've taken from that, which is one, my mum is right. Self-care and not overwhelming yourself and trying to do everything, especially as women, because I think that we are in some way conditioned to feel as though we have to do everything ourselves and we have to get everything done that then and that right at that present moment. I think it's just really an important lesson for all of us to take, but also the lesson that, I think for those of us that are parents, our children mirror what we're doing, not what we're saying. And so if they see you preaching about something, but then not actually practicing it and living it, they're going to mirror that in some kind of a way. And so for me, one of the reasons that my baby's only going to be 1 in a couple of weeks, but still, I'm like, I don't want him to be somebody that overdoes things and overwhelms himself and exhausts himself. And also I need to be what I teach. I need to learn that, yes, I've had this incredibly expansive, hugely brutal in some ways, but beautiful, beautiful year. But now it's time to sort of say enough. Rest. A few months of rest is like the least that I can give myself. Self-care and time and not overwhelming ourselves. I think we overcommit and then we overcommit, we underperform, and then we feel overwhelmed.
And guilty. I just spoke to a sociology professor about this, how different the role of mother is nowadays than it used to be, and I'm very excited I'm organizing an interview with an anthropologist and sociologist of parenthood to talk about that, because today we're just trying to be masters of everything, of this child rearing, where we are constantly present and where we are coaches and teachers and biggest supporters and in the same time best cooks and best wives and have our own career. It's a lot. Women never used to do so much in the history until recently. They would either be at home or they would work.
Yeah.
And the kids were with brothers and sisters or aunts and uncles. Like, we're just juggling so much right now. That's
too much. And I think that, I think it's a big challenge, I think, for all of us. And also, I would say that leads me to actually one final lesson that is a big one. I just only realized in this moment, which is my mum wasn't good at getting help. And, to some degree, that was dictated by financial means. She didn't necessarily have the financial means to throw at getting help, getting a cleaner, getting a nanny, all these kind of things. And one thing that I think that's a lesson that I learned from what she wasn't able to give herself. And yes, she didn't have the means within which to do it. But, I very much believe that you create something and you do something and the universe responds to help you to do that. That's just my belief system. But one thing that, because I saw that and grew up with that, like, I have no shame in having help. I think there's a lot of mums that I've met or parents that I meet or people who are almost like ashamed of having help in some kind of a way. Like they think that it makes them a lesser person. I have zero issue with having help. I have help. I've had help since my baby was born. There was a period when there was social distancing where I wasn't able to have that help. But for me, having help and being able to know that I deserve that and that I don't feel any guilt about it. I feel really good about it. And it makes me a better person. It makes me a better mother. It makes me a better wife. It makes me a better human being. And it makes me happier. It's just something that I think I learned from seeing my mum do it the really tough way. I think sometimes motherhood can involve a little degree of martyrdom of sort of like, I have to do everything myself. And it's like, no, actually, you don't need to do everything yourself. You just need to be strong enough to say that, I want to do this. And you need to have the courage and the tenacity and the discipline and the faith that if you want help, you will be able to get that help and do that. And so I've really mastered that one. I'm good at getting help.
Yay, Ambi. Congratulations. That's a big one.
It's a huge one.
It is. Do we have more or should I try recapping with your help?
Yeah, sure. Recap away, because I think that was a really good one, actually, that one at the end. I suddenly realized that. I was like, God, I really love having help. She's here now. I love it.
We had so many good ones. You started with faith in divine power, being disciplined, and hard work and tenacity, the importance of rituals, which we then talked about and said they create structure and thus boundaries, which create freedom.
Absolutely.
Self-care.
Yes.
Not overdoing things. And then I wrote down while you were talking 2 things you didn't mention before. I wanted to mention her humbleness.
Oh.
Can I put that there? Because you mentioned how she was born into this rich family.
My God,
and how she chose her husband for love and how hard she worked. That for me is humbleness.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you're adding that in because, her humility, I think, is really important because also that has taught me, and she has taught me this, and she always tells me this, like, don't look up to people thinking they're better than you because they're rich or because they have status or fame or, or even intelligence or beauty, whatever it is. Don't worry and think that they're better than you. But equally, don't look down at anyone. Don't look down at someone and say, oh, they're uneducated or they're poor or that, not that I would do that anyway. But she was just saying, don't look at someone and think, oh, what does that person know? Like there's something to learn from all people. And I think that I think her life is extraordinary to go from sort of like, and she was the most beautiful of all her sisters, which is something I think they'd all admit to. And she could have been married off to like some really powerful person. And she didn't. She chose my dad. And my dad was who was supposed to be my dad and the person with whom she brought, the 2 souls, my brother and I, into this lifetime with, into the world. And so I think that's a really beautiful thing as well. Mm-hmm. I love that.
Humility.
You raised that. Humility.
I did. And I wrote down own your own home as a woman.
Oh my God. Own something.
Own something.
Just own something. Own something yourself. Yeah.
And as something she was not able to teach you was getting help. Get help.
Yeah.
Ambi, thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Oh, Anna, I really, really enjoyed it. It's been a long time since I've got to talk with you like this, and it does feel like one of our hikes, but it's actually going to be on a podcast episode. How wonderful.
We did it finally. We recorded our rumblings.
I know.
Now we're going to serve them to other people.
So forgive me, anyone, if I rambled. But you've basically been listening to 2 friends having their usual conversations, but in more depth. I'm glad that you got to know some bits and bobs, a little bit more about me as well, I guess.
I'm very excited about it. I really did. It's funny. We spend so much time talking to each other and we know each other so well. And I've learned more about you and your mom. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Anna, for having me. I can't wait to share this episode with everyone I know.
Yay. If you enjoy Thank You Mama, and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyouMama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider, that's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.